Okay, this is your second video. This video is on how to use sign rules for multiplication of integers instead of modeling. So in the last video, or the first video you watched, you learned how to interpret a multiplication problem of integers using integer chips, or reading it and thinking of it as either repeated addition or repeated subtraction. In this particular video, we're going to talk about how to use sign rules. So let's just look at, before we get anything further, let's just look at 4 different questions, okay? And if we think about a positive 2 times a positive 3, and we'll think of a positive 2 times a negative 3, and a negative 2 times a positive 3, and a negative 2 times a negative 3. If we think of these 4 variations of all the different questions you come up with, if we think about what this would be adding 2 groups of positive 3. And if I'm adding 2 groups of positive 3, there's one group of positive 3 that I'm going to add to the 0. I'm going to take another group of positive 3, and I'm going to add that. And I can see from my answer, my model, it's going to be adding a positive 6 answer when I add 2 groups of positive 3. In this particular one, this would be interpreted as adding 2 groups, because it's a positive 2, adding 2 groups of negative 3. So it's the exact same idea, except this time it's going to be adding negativity to something. Adding 2 groups of negative 3 will be a negative 6, and that makes sense. If I add 2 cup loads of ice, which is negative 3 degrees in temperature, if that's such a thing, I would decrease whatever I was putting it in by 6 degrees. And the third example, if I interpret it with words, it's going to be removing, not adding, but removing 2 groups of positive 3. Right? So I'm removing positivity from something, which I know from just common sense. If I remove positive air temperature molecules from a room, it's going to make the room colder, right? But if I think about it in terms of modeling, right, there's a 0 pair. So if I had 6 of these, enough to make the product work, right, there's a room. Okay, that's whatever temperature it is, that's stasis right there. If I remove a group of positivity from the room and another group or 2 groups of positive 3, I can see from my modeling it's going to be negative 6, right? That's the impact on the room. And finally, removing 2 groups of negative 3. If I think about that from a modeling perspective, there is my 0 pairs to start. Okay. And if I think about it, removing negative temperature from a room makes it warmer, right? So removing 2 groups of negative 3, there's one group of negative 3. If I remove that from a room and remove that from a room, the temperature of the room will increase 6 degrees. Okay, so there's your basic 4 different ideas for multiplication. But what sign rules really tell you is this. If you look at these, and I'll take my highlighter, grab my highlighter here. If you look at this integer and this integer, as well as this integer and this integer, if you look at the signs for my answers, in both of those cases, when I multiplied a positive 2 by a positive 3, I got a positive 6. And a negative 2 by a negative 3, I got a positive 6. And if I think about the other ones, when I multiplied a positive by a negative, or, in this one here, a negative by a positive, my answer for both of those was negative 6, right? So what sign rules really say is this. If I go back just one page here. What are my sign rules? Well, my sign rules are simple. If I multiply 2 integers with the same signs, and what I mean by that is a positive times a positive, or a negative times a negative, I will always equal a positive answer, or in math lingo, a positive product. Okay? And if I multiply, oh, did I put 2 integers? Oh, I meant TWO. Oh, that's bad. 2 integers that are different signs. So integers with different signs, with not same the sign, but different. If we think about those contexts, like a positive multiplied by a negative, or a negative multiplied by a positive, we can see from our example of 4, we will always have a negative product. And that's your sign rules, okay? So instead of always having to think about adding negativity or subtracting negativity or whatever you want to think, groups of this, groups of that, you can simply apply your sign rules. And when you're multiplying a positive by a positive, you'll get a positive answer. When you multiply a negative by a negative, same signs, positive product. And of course, opposite signs, a negative times a positive will give you a negative value, and a positive times a negative will give you a negative value. Okay? Easy as that. So if we look at the show, you know, we have 4 questions here. And he says a positive 4 times a positive 7. Now, if I look at this, those are the same signs, so I know my answer is going to be positive. And 4 times 7 is 28. So the answer using sign rules for A is simply a positive 28. Here, I'm multiplying a positive by a negative. So for B, I know my answer is going to be negative because those are different signs. And 3 times 10 is 30. For C, I have a negative times a negative, which are the same signs, which means my product is going to be positive. And 8 times 2 is 16. And finally, for D, I have different signs, a negative times a positive, so my answer is going to be negative. And 4 times 9 is 36, so those are our answers for that using sign rules. That's so easy. In the second show, you know, just the context of maybe applying this idea of sign rules. It says Dwayne instructs the bank to deduct $65 per month from his bank account and transfer the money into an investment account. What is the total of his deductions in 18 months? So each of these months is going to be considered a group or an amount every month for 18 months. So it's going to be 18 months or 18 groups of deducting $65. Now we're going to treat that as being a negative impact to his bank account. So we're going to treat it as a negative 65, not a 65. We're going to grab our calculator and multiply 18 by 65. We're not going to worry about positive, negative. It's going to be 1,170. 1,170. And we're going to use our sign rules here. This is a positive times a negative, which means my product is going to be negative. And that's a story problem. So then we're going to make a sentence. Therefore, Dwayne will have $1,170 deducted. Now notice I didn't say negative 1,170 because this word deducted is the same idea as a negative sign.